Hi, and welcome to Veeam's session at Microsoft Ignite 2020. My name is Jason Buffington. I'm Veeam's Vice President of Strategy. You can reach me on email as jbuff@veeam.com or just jbuff on Twitter. Today, we're going to be talking about the Microsoft Veeam partnership and what we do to protect data across your data centers, your endpoints, your edges, and of course, the cloud. Specifically, what I'm going to walk you through first is what's driving data protection behavior as we lean in towards 2021. And then I'll specifically get into 5 ways to accelerate your journey to the cloud. We'll talk about backing up Office 365. We'll talk about backing up your on-premise data, but leveraging Azure. We'll migrate or do disaster recovery into Azure. We'll protect Azure natively, and then we'll move some workloads back and forth between. Now, admittedly, I only get about 20 minutes for you today, so we're doing a longer, extended version of this as a webcast in the upcoming weeks. You can find out more about that by going to the URL on the bottom of your screen, vee.am/mscloud. But let's get into the material for today. And to do that, let's set up some context for what's driving the industry around data protection. Earlier in 2020, Veeam did a survey of 1,500 enterprises from around the world, looking at things such as what would drive your organization to change its primary backup solution to a new solution or service. Now, there's a lot of different stuff on here. And if you look on the very bottom of the screen, 2% of orgs said nothing would make me change. I'm thinking of those 2%, some of them are probably using Veeam, so they're happy. And others are probably saying, yeah, my boss has been using the same backup solution for 20 years and we can't change until he retires. But for everybody else, let's look at where that change is actually coming from. Turns out the number one reason why people want to change backup solutions is because their current solution doesn't work well enough to improve the reliability of backup. That'd be like saying, I'm going to change cars. And when you ask why, they say, well, because the car doesn't get me from point A to point B. Then why do you still have that car? All right, so reliability is the number one reason why. Number 2 is around economics, right? Organizations say they need to be able to reduce their software costs. They want to reduce their hardware costs. They want to improve the ROI or the TCO, that return on investment, that total cost of ownership. They want to change the economics by which they're doing data protection. Number 3 is around operational improvement. They want it to work better, not just from a success rate, but they want to get better outcomes. They want to restore faster. They want to lose less data. They want to reduce complexity. They want to have ease of use and better manageability. Those are kind of the top 3: reliability, economics, and operational improvement. But of course, you can't have an IT modernization conversation in 2020 or 2021 without talking about better leveraging the cloud within your overall IT strategy. And certainly data protection should be part of that hybrid multi-cloud architecture that so many organizations are moving towards today. What I want you to know about Veeam is when you think about Veeam, think about cloud data management. In the upper left-hand corner, be very, very clear, Veeam is a backup and recovery solution. Everything we do is based on solving backup and recovery so that you can do so many more things with your data. I'm going to go counterclockwise from that. We solve backup and recovery in the upper left-hand corner so that we can help you improve your governance, your regulatory compliance stance. Once you solve for backup, then you can start to automate and orchestrate and get rid of so many of the mundane tasks associated with backup and recovery that plague so many IT organizations. If we keep on going along that way, once you've solved backup and recovery, then you can start to add more monitoring and analytics to better understand what's going on within our environment. And lastly, once you've solved for backup and recovery, then we can start to look at cloud mobility and actually moving workloads for the right reasons between on-prem and the cloud, and maybe even back again. We'll talk more about that as the session goes on. When you think about cloud data management, when you think about Veeam, what you really want to take away, and I hope that when you come see our demos in the longer version of this session, you'll see everything about Veeam is designed to be simple. It's designed to be flexible. And as that data showed at the very beginning, it's designed to be reliable. Now, if we talk about what does Veeam specifically do in the Microsoft instance, there's a lot of different things we do. In fact, this is a really, really busy chart. But if you look in the lower left-hand corner and just look on that left-hand side, you'll see that if you have physical servers running Windows or Windows Server or Linux, We have agents that'll protect those workloads. We can retain that data within Azure and even directly restore it to Azure. We'll talk more about that. Certainly, Veeam is known for what we do around virtualization, whether that's Hyper-V based, VMware based, or Nutanix. For those workloads that are natively running in Azure, we have agents that can run inside of each Azure-based VM or a native Azure backup solution. We'll talk about that. And then lastly, of course, but not least, protection for Office 365. It's hard to name an application which is more mission critical today for so many organizations than Office 365, including Exchange and SharePoint and OneDrive, etc. So let's go through each of the pieces in what I call the 5 ways to accelerate your journey to the cloud. On the top half of the screen, you'll see cloud-based resources, including Office 365, Microsoft Azure, and of course, Azure Blob Storage is a subset of that. And then on the bottom is your organization as on-premise based resources. As mentioned before, probably one of the most mission-critical applications that most organizations rely on today is Office 365. So we have a native Veeam backup for Office 365 solution, which runs as a VM within Azure. Even more interestingly than that, we can actually store that data not only within that VM, but also leverage Azure Blob Storage for cheaper and longer-term retention of your Office 365 data across your entire organization, even without requiring legal hold or litigation or enhanced licenses. Now, for some organizations, they want to have a complete cloud-based solution. Other organizations really need to be able to, for regulatory purposes, be able to touch at least one copy of your data. And for them, you can actually run Veeam backup for Office 365 on-prem. So now I'm bringing that Office 365 data back so I can actually store a copy locally for rapid recovery or for data mining or analytics or compliance, et cetera, and still have the ability to do long-term retention up back into that Azure Blob Storage. There's lots of reasons why you would want to complement the great things around resiliency and durability that Office 365 already provides with traditional backup and recovery from Veeam. What you're looking at on the left-hand side of this screen is 5 bubbles, where it's a combination of what does Microsoft do great, that's in blue, and where does Veeam complement those capabilities, those are in green. I don't have time to unpack all of them today, but just recognize when it comes to service resiliency, Office 365 has that natively, right? Whether your email or your SharePoint files or your OneDrive directories come from Redmond or Phoenix or Dublin, doesn't matter. Right? So resiliency is natively covered. If you have more like an E5 style license, you also have some level of litigation hold to be able to lock down things for legal purposes. But Veeam allows you to have that same kind of long-term retention for all the data within your environment. That also leans into some of the regulatory compliance things that we do for not only your Office 365 data, but consistently also the rest of your production data as well. Veeam also provides the same kind of operational backups and recoveries for not just Office 365 data, but the rest of your environment as well. And then lastly, Veeam can be part of and should be part of any migration scenario, because the last thing you want to do before you start migrating data, usually using the native tools from Microsoft to bring from your on-premise Exchange and SharePoint into OneDrive, is you ought to have one last good backup of that while it's still on-prem and be able to recover that using those same tools, even though the mailbox was last month on-prem and next month in the clouds. When you look at the Veeam backup for Microsoft Office 365 solution, it's important to recognize that unlike some backup vendors, we don't treat Microsoft 365 and Exchange as the same thing. We recognize there's a breadth of capabilities within the 365 portfolio, including not only Exchange, but SharePoint and OneDrive as well. We protect that with the Veeam backup for Office 365 technology, using some of the same technologies that we use for backing up Exchange and SharePoint on-prem. We back that up to object-based storage. We back it up to local storage within the Veeam backup solution itself. And then we allow you to restore that data using native context-sensitive tools for each workload. So there's a native Veeam Explorer for Microsoft Exchange that can restore mail messages, whether they came from Exchange Online or Exchange on-prem. Same thing, an Explorer for SharePoint Online or SharePoint on-prem, an Explorer for OneDrive, et cetera. Now, in just a few weeks, we're going to have to update this slide because Veeam backup for Microsoft Office 365 version 5 is coming later in 2020. And we're going to have to add another icon, that top left-hand corner, because we are so excited to now be able to offer protection for Teams as well as OneDrive, SharePoint, Exchange. And as the Office 365 portfolio continues to expand and those APIs are available, you should count on Veeam being able to continually protect that data as well. So that's just one of the 5 ways to accelerate your journey. Let's look at some of the others a little bit more quickly. Let's talk about retaining your on-prem backups into Azure. In this case, we're talking about your physical servers that are within the data center. We're talking about remote office and branch office servers. We're VMs that are running in VMware as well as Hyper-V and Nutanix. So wherever your on-prem infrastructure still runs, we're going to back up that data first to local storage so that we have the ability to rapidly recover, and then leverage Azure Blob Storage as the long-term retention tier for your data protection solution. For many organizations, if the one thing you wanted to do to improve your backups going into 2021 is just get rid of tape, leveraging Azure Blob Storage as your long-term retention tier may be exactly what you're looking for. So this is a different way to say that. We're going to protect Azure-hosted VMs. We're going to protect VMs on-prem, physical servers, all of that, including those same granular recovery capabilities. The way we do that, by the way, when you're in the Veeam UI, remember, simple and flexible. If you want to declare a storage repository in Veeam, you might pick one of the dedupe appliances on that left-hand side. If I want to use cloud-based storage, I just use something on the right-hand side. Let's pick the Microsoft Azure Blob Storage among that list. And then from that point on, it simply becomes a retention tier to Veeam. Specifically, how that works is we call this a capacity tier. Normally, if in an all on-prem Veeam solution, you'd see a VBK file, that's our backup file format, and that includes not only the backup data, green, but also the metadata describing what we have in blue. When you enable Azure Blob Storage as a cloud tier, we keep the metadata on-prem, we make a copy of that for the cloud, and then the rest of the backup data simply now moves into object stores up in Azure Blob. What's really exciting about this, by the way, is because the data protection repository in Azure Blob is self-describing, even if the entire on-prem environment caught on fire, got blown away by a tornado, got flooded by a hurricane, whatever the scenario is, those backups in Azure Blob Storage are self-describing, which means I can attach a brand new, even free copy of Veeam to the Azure Blob Store and start immediately being able to restore data. In Veeam, in order to be flexible and simple, all we have to do is just check that box that says, which blob do you want to use? And then you have some options like, do I want to move those into the blob after, say, 7 days or 14 or 30? And by the way, I also want to make a copy immediately, so no matter what happens, I have survivable data without tapes and paying some nice guy in a white truck to come lose my tapes for me. That's how easy capacity tier is in V10. Now in V11, which we just announced is coming when we had our own conference at VeeamON, we already had performance tiers. Those are made of disk. We talked about the capacity tier using Microsoft Azure Blob Storage. We are very excited to talk about being able to leverage the archive tier within Azure Blob as well. So for that cold data that you would write once and almost probably never read again, but you need for retention purposes, yeah, that's coming too. So that's our second of our 5 ways to accelerate storage. By the way, not only could you send the data directly to Azure Blob Storage, but if you're leveraging one of the tens of thousands of Veeam cloud service providers, they provide expertise in managing all of your on-prem backups for you as well. And by the way, they can use Azure Blob Storage as well, so we can kind of still keep that in the family. One of the other side benefits of this kind of architecture of how we leverage Azure Blob Storage is it also means that we have a capability called Veeam Cloud Mobility, which basically says that even if we backed up something on-prem with our physical servers, running Windows or Linux, our virtualized VMs, even things protected by the Community Edition, we could actually restore those directly into Azure. We could restore those VMs into Azure Stack. You can even manage the entire thing through PowerShell, so you can do migrations of workloads. And that's starting to get really interesting as far as the fluidity of where should a VM reside over time. But we can help accelerate your adoption of hybrid cloud. And that's going to bring us into our third scenario to accelerate the journey. And that is to either migrate or, for the purposes of disaster recovery, to take workloads that were originally on-prem But instead of having a secondary infrastructure, instead of maintaining a DR site and idle metal is sitting there waiting for bad things to happen, go ahead and just bring those VMs, or even if it was physical before, it's a VM now, up in Azure storage and immediately start having those users be productive again. Now, once you start leveraging VMs in Azure, you're going to find out that you like running that virtual data center that's now hosted in the cloud, but you still got to do native protection of those workloads. So at Microsoft Ignite last year, we actually announced Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure, where we take the same kinds of outcomes around protecting your virtualized environment, in this case, using VMs that are hosted in Azure. We protect that again using our own VM that's running Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure, and we can retain that data in Azure Blob Storage as well. If I look a little bit closer on that, we actually combine the native snapshotting capabilities that Microsoft Azure provides with our own backup and recovery capabilities so that, again, you could back up from one, including backing up from Azure and bringing it back down on-prem again, or vice versa is more common, backing up on-prem and then rehosting that into the Azure environment. As our fifth way, and this one's kind of new and exciting, the ability to actually fluidly move workloads between on-prem and Azure. So in this case, I have a VM and I can protect it in one location and bring it back again. Now, this actually comes in a pair of releases. Just over the summer of 2020, we announced Veeam Backup and Replication version 10A. And 10A includes a function that we call platform services, which allows us to interoperate more and manage and move data more efficiently and integrated between our on-premise flagship data center technology and our Azure-specific offering that you see up ahead. Now, every quarter, we're doing new innovations on our Veeam Backup for the cloud-based native tool sets. And so coming in V2, again, before the end of 2020, you'll see Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure version 2, talking with Veeam Backup and Replication version 10A, and now I can fluidly move workloads as I need to by backing up on one and recovering to another. Those are our 5 ways. And so I hope now this really busy slide makes a lot more sense. Regardless of what parts of the Microsoft ecosystem that your workloads are relying on, Veeam can protect those. And in fact, as you modernize your IT strategy and go from one platform to another, it's important that you don't go from being well protected with your existing infrastructure to unprotected with your new infrastructure just because you wanted to modernize and embrace more facets of the cloud. So just rest assured knowing that no matter where your data is, Veeam will be there to back it up and ensure its recovery last month, this month, and next. So what I hope you took away from today is Veeam's core purpose is to be the most trusted provider of backup solutions that deliver cloud data management. As you look at our demos, as you read our papers and watch our videos, you'll find that Veeam is focused on being simple, on being flexible, and being reliable. Wherever your data is, now or in the future, Veeam is the cloud data backup for what's next. I hope this was useful for you today. If you want to register for the longer version and see demos of everything that I talked about today, please go to VEE.am, that's Veeam with a little dot in the middle, /MS Cloud. Or if you want to reach out to me and ask questions during the week of Ignite or after, you can find me on Twitter in the lower right-hand corner. Just tweet out to jbuff. Again, my name is Jason Buffington for Veeam. Welcome to Ignite 2020. Thanks for watching.